I need to figure out how to have time to do. If you asked me how would I have time to, I don't know, throw a dinner party, or how I would have time to, I don't know, run a bunch of board meetings, that I get. But this is like breathing for me. It's not labor intensive in the way that I think for other people they imagine it to be.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Shonda Rhimes. She has a new memoir called Year of Yes. And of course, she's the creator of ABC's Thursday Night, Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, How to Get Away with Murder. I'm always interested in hearing how people decide what, if it's a conscious decision, what kind of family they'd like to have and how they go about trying to create it. You have 3 children, 2 are adopted, 1 is through a surrogate, and you've done this as a single woman. At what age did you know that you were going to have children with or without a partner?
I think I've always known I was going to have kids. It's very interesting because I was talking to somebody else about this. It's a thing that's always been there. The same way the fact that I always wanted to be a writer has always been there. I've always wanted to have kids, and I always knew I was going to have kids. Was I ever going to get married? That was never there. That was like, maybe. But there was a very big certainty that I was going to have kids. I'm the youngest of 6. I'm from a huge family. Everybody in my family has kids. There's like, I don't know, 17 grandkids already. And it's just the world that I grew up in that felt very clear to me that children were something that I definitely wanted to have.
At what age were you ready to say, I'm moving forward and doing it now? Where were you in your life at that point?
I exhale because I'm gonna tell you the story that I love to tell, but I don't love to tell. I was, I think, 30 years old, 31 years old, and I had just broken up with some boyfriend, and I had rented a house in Vermont for a month, and I was going there to write and feel sorry for myself and hate boys. And I got on a plane and I flew out there, and the house was in the middle of nowhere, and the next morning 9/11 happened. And so I was sitting in this house in the middle of nowhere with nothing but like a satellite TV, watching what I thought was the world come to an end. And I thought, well, the world's going to end and I've done nothing. Like, I'm a child, I've done nothing. And I got out a piece of paper and I made a list of things I was going to do if the world didn't end. And at the top of the list was adopt a baby, because I knew that that was like, I cannot have the world end and have never been a mother. I will be devastated. And the world didn't end. And I went home and I hired an adoption attorney. And 9 months and 2 days after 9/11, my daughter Harper was born.
So this was before Grey's Anatomy, right?
Yes.
But
so I always say I had a daughter, and then I had shows, and I had 2 more daughters.
Your mother had 6 children. Your parents had 6 children, and
yes.
She went to college. She was a professional. Had you watched how she managed to make that work?
My mother was a stay-at-home mom until I was in 7th grade, and then she went to college. And then when I went off to college, my mother went off and got her PhD. And we graduated the same year. The year I graduated from college, my mother got her PhD. She got her hood. It was really great. I was really proud of her. And the year I got my first job, she got her first job. So it was very cool to watch her evolve in this way. Go from being, you know, a stay-at-home mother of 6 to being a full-fledged professional out in the world. And for her, I think it was incredibly freeing and very exciting to have a huge second act. It's why I always feel like when people say I'm too old to do something or I could never do that, I'm always like, my mom had 6 kids and then she became a professor. Like, what are you talking about? Anything is possible.
You write that as a child you were highly intelligent, way too chubby, incredibly sensitive, nerdy, and painfully shy, and that you had no friends.
Yeah, definitely for a time, absolutely.
Why didn't you have friends?
I think
for all the reasons I just mentioned.
Speak for themselves.
Did it bother you that you didn't have friends?
Yeah, it really did. And I spent a lot of time. I have all of these little journals I spent all of this time writing in, and writing stories for myself in, and creating worlds in, and I spend a lot of time writing and a lot of time reading. You know, people always say, like, where did you grow up? I'm like, I grew up in books. I grew up in my journals. I grew up in those worlds that I was writing about and reading about. And I was perfectly content, which is what's really great about it, is that once I started doing that, I was perfectly content and existed quite happily. I didn't spend my entire life not having friends growing up, but during that period of time, it really did sort of save me.
It's really important to you as a show creator to have characters that reflect the diversity of American life. When you were growing up, did you feel like you had characters that you could identify with in the sense that, of them being African American? I know there's many ways to identify with characters. They don't have to, look like you or be from the same background as you, but it's nice to see characters who are from,
Yeah. What's interesting is that I was saying this to somebody else the other day. Oprah was ruling daytime television. Cosby was ruling nighttime television. Whoopi Goldberg was ruling Broadway, and Eddie Murphy was ruling the movie theaters in the late 1980s when I was a teenager and deciding that I wanted to be a writer for real. So to me, everything felt very possible.
If you're just joining us, my guest is Shonda Rhimes. She has a new memoir called Year of Yes. We'll talk more after we take a short break. This is Fresh Air.
WNYC is supported by Simon & Schuster's Pimsleur Language Programs, a portable, science-based method designed for speaking a new language in 30 days. Available at pimsleur.com and wherever books are sold. Fox Searchlight Pictures presenting the new film Brooklyn, starring Saoirse Ronan, about a young Irish woman torn between life and love in her native country and her new home in New York. In select theaters now.
You're listening to Fresh Air on 93.9 FM and WNYC.org.
Support for NPR comes from NPR member stations and from Vonage, offering cloud-based solutions with 40 built-in calling features like video conferencing, virtual mailbox, and work from anywhere at Vonage.com. Vonage, the business of better. And from Subaru, automotive partner of the National Park Service Centennial. Subaru encourages people to explore America's treasures and discover a national park adventure at findyourpark.com. Love, it's what makes a Subaru a Subaru.
This is Fresh Air, and if you're just joining us, my guest is Shonda Rhimes, the creator of Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, and How to Get Away with Murder, which is ABC's Thursday night lineup. Now she has a new memoir called Year of Yes. So we were talking about your Year of Yes, in which you decided to say yes to things. What about saying no? How hard was it for you to learn to say no? Like dating back to when you had to say no in casting Grey's Anatomy to an actress who you didn't think was right for the role, talented but incorrect for you. Was learning to say no hard? And after a year of saying yes, did you start to say no a lot more again?
Saying no really is saying yes to yourself. One of the things that I really had a difficult time with was the ability to say no, and was the ability to have the difficult conversations that go with saying no. And figuring out a way to make it possible for me to stand up and advocate for myself in that way was very hard. I ended up writing myself a little script and putting it on a Post-it note and sticking it to the side of my computer and then reading it aloud whenever I had to give a very difficult no. But I also found it wildly freeing once I started doing it. Because once you start telling people no, and their reaction always tells you, A, who they are, and B, what situation you're in. If you say no to somebody, somebody asks you for a ton of money, and you say no to them, and they respond with vitriol and hatred, then you know exactly who they are now and what their relationship is to you. Everything's been defined, and everything's clear, and now you know where you stand. If you are in a negotiation and you say no, either they're going to back away or they're going to give in. You know where you are and you know where you stand. It becomes a very interesting tool to use, really. It allows you to see things in a different light. And I started thinking of it that way, as opposed to thinking of it as something that was going to be dangerous or be hurtful or be scary to do.
So I want to ask you something about writing and acting, and this relates to something that you said when you were being interviewed by Elle magazine. You said that my contract with the actors on Scandal is you'll say every word as it's written, and I'll never tell you how to do that. Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I always feel like there's two parts to a character. You know, I bring the words and they bring the spirit. So there's always just a beautiful magic to, I'll write something, we consider that text. It goes down to the sound stage, they act it. I never tell them what the intentions are, what I want from a scene, how it needs to quote unquote be. You know, a lot of showrunners, a lot of creators really have very specific ideas about how they want their scenes to play. I write the words, I let them play the scenes, and then I get to watch them in the editing room and discover something about the characters that maybe I didn't know before, and find something magical has happened that's very exciting to me, or discover something that just floors me or throws me in a whole different direction. Sometimes it throws me off my path, and that's exciting too.
Is there an example of a character transformation or a plot twist that came to you as a result of watching a surprising interpretation of lines that you've written?
There was a scene, and I can't remember exactly what the scene is, but I remember watching something in the editing room of Scandal and running upstairs to the writer's room and saying, "You guys, Cyrus is gay." Cyrus is gay, and that is the secret that he's been carrying around all this time, and the reason why he's so resentful about feeling like he can't be president, and everybody being like, "What?" and me sort of explaining from how he had played this scene, why this was his secret and how I could see it in this whole 9 yards, and literally like that completely changed the trajectory of his character.
So do you think that the actor was playing it knowing in his mind that the character was gay, or is that something that you projected onto the performance?
He said that he was playing a repression. I think he felt he was playing a Republican repression, but he said he was playing a repression and sort of a loveless life or something like that. He said it was some version of that to me in my writer's brain translated into a whole life. You know, I morphed it into a whole story that worked for both of us.
Do you accept improvisation on the set, or is that out?
No, there's no improvisation, because, as I said, the words exist as the words. We don't say words that are not written on page, and we always say all the words that are written on the page. That's sort of our agreement. And I don't mean it as like we have this formal contract. It's just sort of the way it's always been. On Scandal especially, the actors treat the words as if it's a play. They feel like it's their job to figure out the meaning under the words and to just say the words. The words are not a suggestion.
How old were you when you started writing? What were your earliest attempts to tell stories?
I probably started storytelling when I was about 3. I would dictate stories into a tape recorder and try to convince my mother to type them up. I also spent a lot of time in our kitchen pantry. We had a little kitchen pantry and it was filled with canned goods. And I have really vivid memories of my mother in the kitchen, the television on, playing the Watergate hearings, and me inside the pantry playing my own little version of what now I understand was my own little version of the Watergate hearings inside the pantry with the cans, the smaller cans being, you know, the less important members of the Congress or whatever, and the bigger cans being the more important, more dangerous people. Some of them were kings and queens. Sometimes there were, you know, different worlds, but they were all sort of their own little drama playing out. And I did that for days and days and days, probably a year or so I spent time in that pantry. I loved it.
So you're telling me that cans of peas were probably the prototype for characters on Scandal?
Probably.
Shonda Rhimes, it's really been great to talk with you. Thank you so much.
It's been wonderful to talk to you too.
Shonda Rhimes is creator of the TV series Grey's Anatomy and Scandal and executive producer of How to Get Away with Murder. They make up ABC's Thursday night lineup. She has a new memoir called Year of Yes. Coming up, Ken Tucker considers the evolving sound of country music. This is Fresh Air.
WNYC support comes from a Netflix original film, Beasts of No Nation, from Cary Fukunaga. A West African boy is forced to transform into a child soldier after his village is torn apart by civil war. Available in select theaters and now streaming on Netflix. Universal Pictures presenting By the Sea, a new film about the tenacity of love that stars Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie Pitt, written and directed by Angelina Jolie Pitt, in select theaters on November 13th. Simon & Schuster's Pimsleur language programs, a portable science-based method designed for speaking a new language in 30 days. Available at pimsleur.com and wherever books are sold.
You're listening to Fresh Air with Terry Gross on WNYC. Coming up next, it's The Takeaway on 93.9 FM, and on AM 820, it's The World.
This is Fresh Air. Rock critic Ken Tucker watched the recent Country Music Association Awards show and was mightily impressed with the duet between Chris Stapleton and Justin Timberlake. He's also been listening to the debut album of the band Old Dominion called Meat and Candy, and here's the album and that TV appearance as more proof that the definition of country music is becoming more elastic. Here's how Timberlake led into the duet on his song Drink You Away.
Nashville, how you feeling tonight? Can I put a little Memphis up in here? Yeah, here we go. Bittersweet thing, could just be a dream, or just the same nightmare that keeps me awake.
Shows are usually planned and scripted to create crowd-pleasing moments that seem spontaneous, which made the high point of the recent broadcast of the Country Music Association Awards a real surprise. The night featured a series of rock and pop stars duetting with country stars, and on paper, matching the smooth Justin Timberlake with the sandpapery Chris Stapleton was an intriguingly quirky notion. Show co-host Brad Paisley introduced them by saying we would hear the Nashville sound meets the soul music of Memphis. He was right, and then some. The duo started singing Tennessee Whiskey from Stapleton's recent album Traveler, which I reviewed for Fresh Air. Then they segued into Timberlake's song Drink You Away, and you couldn't help but lean toward the TV screen, letting the pleasure and passion of the musicians pour into you. With harmonies from Stapleton's wife Morgan, they traded verses. Stapleton's rumble proved remarkably elastic and wry. Timberlake phrased like an R&B crooner and a soul shouter. Delicacy met power. cameras panned across the audience of industry insiders and fans, which until that moment had been politely attentive. Now they were on their feet, clapping to the beat, their mouths open, to sing along, to cheer, their faces creased with joy, happy shock. It was one of those moments when barriers of genre and hardened notions of what constitutes country